Alrighty everyone, welcome back. It is now the beginning of May of 2023, and given that there's a lot of things going on within the Star Wars fandom right now about how the fandom still to this day remains divided, and that is Disney's main goal, to really kind of mend that back together to the way it used to be, and to really just reunite the fan base, to really just bring it down to the basics, providing fun and engaging material that's really going to make fans looking forward to what's next. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future Star Wars updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support, and let's jump right into exactly what's been going on with the whole Pedro Pascal and Kathleen Kennedy situation and the whole firing scenario. Now, you guys may have been on top of this. We've been talking about this for a while, about his involvement with Skeleton Crew and how that was sabotaged by Kathleen Kennedy. Let's be clear here. This is specifically for the Skeleton Crew series, nothing to do with Mando Season 4 or Ahsoka Season 2, which, by the way, Pedro is still attached to. But let's, jump on the other factors that came to light about what led to his removal, essentially, as Din Djarin, one of the most established characters in the Star Wars live-action series on Disney+. And when you look at stuff like this, alright, when you realize that Kathleen Kennedy tossed away who is becoming an A-list actor, or might even be there right now in that, overall position. So, with that being said, with Disney and Lucasfilm still struggling with the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew, one big situation that has only been getting worse involves the Pedro Pascal firing scenario from the Skeleton Crew series by the hands of Kathleen Kennedy. As it turns out, one of the other big factors as to why Pedro was laid off from the show as Din Djarin for two of his big cameos in the middle and end of the series had to do with the fact that both Kathy Kennedy and Jon Watts wanted to turn Din Djarin into a comedic character, and surprisingly, that they wanted to cut out all the scenes he had filmed so far where he was in the suit, and only wanted to use the actor that were actually going to use the stunts, of course, to stay in the suit. This was so that Pedro was going to be used as a downgraded pay as a voice actor instead. Pedro was still paid for the scenes that he had shot, regardless of them being cut from the show. However, Pedro stood up for the character's story and felt it was wrong to turn Din into a comedic-heavy character for Skeleton Crew. Now, we talked about this lightly about a week ago, where they wanted to actually really add more comedy relief to the character. Look, when you look at Din Djarin, he's not a comedic character. Sure, he's in association with Grogu, who's a comedic character for sure, but Din in isolation is not a comedic-driven character, not in the slightest. It's like looking at, characters like Palpatine or, other characters that are more serious and turning them into comedic figures. It does not work. And that's what they wanted to do with Din Djarin. Now, when you look at stuff like this, it makes sense, because Jon Watts is the showrunner, and if you guys don't know Jon Watts, he made the Spider-Man films per Disney and Marvel. And as you all know, those are very comedic-heavy Spider-Man movies, as opposed to the Raimi films. Now, yeah, the Raimi films had comedy, but it's a different type of comedy. Marvel has its own type of comedy, and that's what Jon Watts wanted to do to Din Djarin. He wanted to Marvelize him. So, Pedro stood up for himself, and I'm proud about that, even though if it led to his removal from Skeleton Crew. Moving on. Now, this was Watts' vision to Marvelize Din Djarin into a Tony Stark-like figure. The other factor that led to Kennedy firing Pedro was that of course, he did not want to film a scene where Din was going to seemingly die inside of a large ship explosion. This is not to say that Kathy was killing him off for the character, but her cheap tactics to surprise the audience and disagree with this approach. So basically what Pedro disagreed with was that Pedro felt that these were cheap tactics to surprise the audience and cheap shock value, and disagreed with that approach greatly. So basically what Kathy was doing is that she was essentially making it like Din Djarin died, but she was not really killing him off. She just wanted to kind of create a seemingly death at the very end of Skeleton Crew. You could say the same exact thing here about, for example, Moff Gideon at the end of Season 3, right? Kind of like that. That's what she wanted to do with Din Djarin in the end of Skeleton Crew, leaving the fans wondering for a couple of years what happened to Din Djarin. Is he dead? Is he not dead? Kind of similar to what they did with other franchises out there before in the past. You know, they did the same exact thing with Superman, right? When he's in the coffin, and at the end, you know, he's in there and you see a little rumbling, and it kind of teases that, yeah, he's not really dead. Stuff like that they wanted to do with Din Djarin, except in a very cheap way that was going to leave the fans, you know, getting, you know, stringed along for a couple of years. Moving on. So, this is what led to further arguments and creative differences until Kennedy let him go. As of now, Kennedy is planning to not even go through with recasting Din Djarin, as she knows it will only create more backlash of that news hitting the headlines of a new voice actor. Pedro is now dedicated to Mando 4 and Ahsoka Season 2 with John and Dave for his return as Din. As of now, it is not known if he will be making an appearance in Ahsoka Season 1, so let's clarify. There's been no word about Din's return in Season 1 of Ahsoka. Either they really have that locked down, or they're going to do some extra filming just before the release date of Ahsoka, which that would have to begin somewhere in June or July. What I like about this, though, is that Pedro Pascal stood up for himself, and it is a blessing in disguise. Sure, he got fired, but you know what? If he stayed, I think it would have truly ruined the character without a doubt. You can't Marvelize a character like Din. You can't Marvelize Star Wars. I'm sorry to say this for those of you that like that, but it's just not the style of the franchise. You can't Marvelize Star Wars. It just does not work. They tried to kind of do that in some scenes, if you guys may have paid close attention, in some of the sequel trilogy movies, where they really tried to Marvelize that, you know, that scene in The Rise of Skywalker, like, they fly now, they fly now, they fly now, where they said it like 3 times. That was very Marvel-esque, and that was actually something that Kevin Feige told Kathleen Kennedy to do. Not a big surprise there, you know, knowing where that really came from. So, overall, I'm really thankful that Pedro stood up for himself, stood up for the fans, and for the character and John and Dave's creation. And you know what? At the end of the day, Kathleen Kennedy now realizes that maybe it's not a good idea to bring back Din at all, period. Given that even if she brought somebody back to do the voice, it's going to get out there, it's going to meet the headlines, and it's going to create backlash. And basically, that's something that she wants to avoid and divert from. So overall, given that it is the beginning of May still, we're still a little ways off from Star Wars Ahsoka. We don't really have a hard release date yet for this August. It's aimed to be in the middle or late August timeframe, right around there. This way they can properly give enough time for that to build up with the marketing throughout the summer, you know, leading basically into the months of September and October to conclude the show, for the most part. So anyways, guys, I would like to hear what you all really have to say about this whole Pedro drama that's happening over at Lucasfilm. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys next time.